Imagine losing the one person you love most in the world. Now, imagine that loss unleashing a darkness you never knew existed within yourself. That's where our story begins. This isn't your typical revenge story. This is the story of Zhang, a man who, after his grandfather's murder, doesn't just seek revenge, he becomes something else entirely. Something primal. Something terrifying. Stick around to see how far he'll go. The protagonist's grandfather had passed away, leaving him alone. He had been killed by someone who had cut him in half through the torso. Despite his grandfather's death, the protagonist did not shed a single tear nor feel any sadness, even though his grandfather had been his only family. He recalled a memory from the past, a time when he had found a spirit-connecting herb in the eastern region, just as his grandfather had described. He remembered that there had been a fox den nearby, where only baby foxes were present, their mother absent. His grandfather had asked him if he had killed the babies, to which the protagonist replied that he had not, as doing so would have saddened the mother fox. Pleased with his response, his grandfather had praised him and made him promise to keep his true nature hidden and never reveal it to anyone. Now back in the present, the protagonist grinned evilly and apologized to his grandfather, stating that he would not be able to keep that promise. He then picked up a scythe and left. The scene shifted to Zhongyang County, where petty criminals and mountain bandits were being transported in carriages. The townspeople watched in disgust as the prisoners passed by. While most carriages were filled with multiple criminals, one carriage held only a single prisoner. A mysterious man wearing a straw hat observed the scene from a nearby inn. He remarked that the prisoner was young, likely the same age as his young master. A middle-aged man in yellow joined him at the table and warned him not to underestimate the prisoner simply because of his youth, suggesting that he might be the most dangerous of all. The man in yellow ordered drinks and explained that the young prisoner had killed numerous people with a scythe, earning him the nickname the Scythe Killer. The martial artist listening to the story seemed unimpressed, dismissing it as mere murder. When asked about his request, the martial artist explained that he needed to hire someone young and expendable. However, his attention was suddenly drawn to the Scythe Killer, who had been struck by a rock thrown by an angry bystander. Blood streaked down the Scythe Killer's face, but he remained unfazed. The martial artist, recognizing the Scythe Killer as the protagonist, abruptly stood up and declared that he no longer had a job for him. Ignoring the middle-aged man's protests, the martial artist left, having already found the perfect target. By nightfall, the protagonist had been imprisoned in the inner castle of Zhongyang County. Soldiers patrolled the jail and 2 guards were stationed outside his cell. The protagonist, handcuffed and bloodied, wore a bored expression. He reflected on his rash actions, recalling how he had followed his grandfather's murderer only to be easily defeated. The killer, a middle-aged martial artist with a straw hat and blade scars on his face, had grinned at him. In the protagonist's eyes, the man was a monster. He realized that his lack of martial arts training had led to his defeat and wondered if learning martial arts would allow him to overcome the killer. However, he soon faced the grim reality of his situation. He was powerless in a prison cell with little hope of a second chance. Suddenly, the protagonist noticed smoke rising beneath his feet. At first, he thought it might be a fire, but he soon recognized the distinct smell of herbs. Drawing on his knowledge from collecting herbs with his grandfather, he identified the smoke's components: lizard's tail, purple parsnip, valerian root, and birthroot, a combination that created a sleep-inducing aroma. By this point, all the guards had fallen unconscious, and even the protagonist seemed affected. The cell door opened, and a mysterious man wearing a straw hat and a face covering entered. He freed the protagonist and attempted to lead him away, but was shocked to find the protagonist still awake. The protagonist kicked the man and fled, though his hands remained bound. The poorly combined herbs had allowed him to resist the effects of the smoke. However, he was soon struck from behind by the mysterious man, who revealed himself to be the same martial artist from the inn earlier that day. The martial artist explained that he had pressed the protagonist's pressure points, rendering him immobile. The protagonist, surprised by the man's speed, realized he was dealing with a skilled martial artist. The man struck him again, sending him crashing into a wall. The protagonist briefly wondered if this was the same man who had killed his grandfather, but dismissed the thought upon noticing the absence of facial scars. As the protagonist lay in pain, a young man wearing a veil appeared, addressing the martial artist as Guard Cam and asking if this was the target. Guard Cam stepped aside, allowing his young master to approach. The young master expressed disappointment at the uninteresting and foul-smelling prison. He ordered Guard Cam to prop the protagonist up so he could see his face clearly. Removing his hat, the young master smiled, noting that the protagonist looked exactly like him and calling it fate. The protagonist was equally surprised by their resemblance. The young master explained the irony of their situation. 2 people with the same face, one a young master and the other a death row inmate. He then offered the protagonist a rare opportunity to become the 3rd young master of the Great Mock Sword Manor, serving as his stand-in. The young master assured him that the role would be easy, requiring only that he stay in his room and enjoy a comfortable life. Once his duties were complete, he would be given money and freedom. Guard Cam stepped forward, offering the protagonist a red pill and confirming that it was poison, a necessary measure to ensure his cooperation. The protagonist, after a moment of hesitation, accepted the pill and swallowed it. The young master praised him and they agreed to work together. Guard Cam removed the protagonist's restraints, and the group began to leave. As they walked, the young master asked the protagonist to move ahead. However, when Guard Cam turned to address the young master, he was horrified to find the young master's neck twisted unnaturally, his face frozen in confusion. The protagonist stood nearby, smiling maliciously after having brutally killed the young master. Guard Cam was stunned as the young master's lifeless body collapsed to the ground. The protagonist, still smiling, asked Guard Cam what he would do now. With a sinister expression, he declared, "Now the fake is dead." The scene unfolds in chaos and flames. The inn is ablaze, fire crackling as its orange glow lights the night. Amidst the inferno, the protagonist, scythe in hand, cuts down everyone in his path with ruthless precision. Each swing of his weapon is fueled by unrestrained fury and an unsettling joy. Blood splatters his hands, which tremble from the thrill of the kill. Screams echo as panicked patrons try to flee, gasping and crying for help. To him, any of them could be responsible for his grandfather's murder. His face twists into a grotesque grin, the mask of his true nature, one his grandfather had implored him to hide. He stands amidst a pile of bodies, his ecstasy palpable. Only one survivor remains, a man trembling in terror. As the scythe killer raises his weapon for the final strike, a sudden force sends him flying sideways. He crashes into a wall with a groan, pain shooting through his body. Before he can recover, his attacker steps into view, a martial artist wielding a sword and a confident smile. The martial artist closes the distance in a blur, too fast for the scythe killer's eyes to follow, and seizes him by the neck. With a swift thrust, the sword pierces the scythe killer's torso. Blood gushes from his mouth as he chokes, gasping for air. The martial artist withdraws his blade, observing coldly. "To survive my ultimate technique without any martial arts training, you're extraordinary. But that makes you dangerous." Determined to eliminate the threat, the martial artist stabs him again. The scythe killer collapses, blood pooling beneath him, rage and frustration etched on his face. He curses his own weakness, certain he is about to die. By some stroke of fortune, he survives, but only to be sentenced to execution 2 days later. Yet fate has other plans. Later, the protagonist grins at Guard Cam, his captor, and taunts, "Now the fake is dead." Guard Cam's expression darkens with fury as he seizes the scythe killer by the neck and slams him against the wall. "You dare mock me?" he growls. But the scythe killer, unfazed, smirks and tightens his grip on Cam's wrist. "You planned to have me killed from the beginning. I knew I couldn't trust you." Surprised by the scythe killer's unexpected strength, Cam quickly regains control, using his martial arts to throw him to the floor effortlessly. As Cam raises his weapon to strike the killing blow, the scythe killer speaks again. "Wait, let's make a deal. I've already taken the poison, haven't I? You need me alive to serve you." Cam hesitates, considering the proposal. Finally, he stabs the ground next to the scythe killer and steps back. "From now on, your name is ManhwaCapped. You'll serve as the third young master of the Mock Sword Manor, and you'll obey me without question." The scythe killer grins wickedly. "Understood." Guard Cam escorts him to the Mock Sword Manor, issuing strict instructions. "Stay away from the other family members. If you're caught, you won't get the antidote and the poison will kill you." ManhwaCapped's only response is a dismissive smirk. Cam, undeterred, threatens him. "Disobey me and I'll end your life myself." He hands ManhwaCapped a pill. "Take one of these every 24 hours to neutralize the poison. Miss a dose and you're dead." As dawn breaks, ManhwaCapped swallows the pill and reflects on his fortune. Not only has he survived the martial artist's brutal attacks, but he has also gained a second chance. He wonders if this twist of fate is his grandfather's doing from the heavens. With the body of the real ManhwaCapped, a look-alike, left behind in the prison, the martial artist who killed his grandfather likely believes him dead. ManhwaCapped is now determined. The Mach clan, known for its martial arts prowess, will be his opportunity to grow stronger. Pretending to be ManhwaCapped, he resolves to master martial art techniques. When the time comes, he will face his grandfather's killer and deliver vengeance, exacting the same brutal end that robbed him of his family. While the protagonist is eating, he notices a shadow outside his door, a guard stationed to watch him. The man's name is Go-chan, a disciple of Guard Cam. Go-chan fidgets restlessly, muttering under his breath. Has Guard Cam gone soft? He wonders aloud. He's still reeling from the revelation that the real ManhwaCapped was killed by a mere civilian. "What now? What happens to our plan?" he asks. Guard Cam's voice echoes in his mind. "We'll adapt. Until then, continue as his guard. Once our plan is ready, we'll eliminate him and align with someone else." Go-chan grits his teeth, still unconvinced. "We've already poisoned him. Can't we use him to our advantage?" But Guard Cam's warning rings clear. He's clever, dangerous, and not the type to obey. The longer we're tied to him, the greater the risk. Inside, the protagonist quietly observes through a crack in the door. They haven't told him why they needed a stand-in. But from what he's seen, the mock manor is secure. They don't need someone to impersonate the third young master for protection. Then what's their real motive, he wonders. Tapping his fingers on the table, a sly smile spreads across his face as a sudden realization dawns. They intend to switch sides. Hours pass and Go-chan dozes off. Seizing the moment, the protagonist opens the door, startling the guard awake. Need something? Go-chan snaps, trying to mask his surprise. Just some fresh air, the protagonist replies nonchalantly. And a few questions for you? Irritated, Go-chan gestures for him to go back inside. When he doesn't comply, Go-chan slams him against the door. Don't test me. Go back inside. But the protagonist remains unfazed. He stares into Go-chan's eyes, then mutters, You're definitely weaker than guard Cam. Before Go-chan can react, he grabs his shoulder, throws him to the ground and pins him down. Startled, Go-chan struggles but finds himself immobilized. The protagonist strikes several points on Go-chan's back, mimicking the technique guard Cam once used on him. Go-chan's body stiffens, unable to move. Panic sets in. Was this bastard hiding martial arts, he thinks. The protagonist frowns. Did I get it wrong? He wonders aloud, then strikes the points again. Go-chan's disbelief grows. To replicate a technique after seeing it just once. This man is terrifying. Desperate, Go-chan reminds him of the poison coursing through his veins. If you don't take the neutralizer, you'll die, he shouts. The protagonist smirks, abruptly grabbing Go-chan's jaw. Drawing blood from his fingertip, he lets a single drop fall into Go-chan's mouth. The guard chokes, his eyes widening in horror. Poison, he realizes. I need to circulate my energy to expel it. I've been experimenting with poison since I was a child, the protagonist explains, his tone cold. Living with my grandfather, I developed an immunity. Over time, even my blood became poisonous. He licks the remaining blood from his finger. I don't need the neutralizer, he adds with a wicked grin. Go-chan trembles. This man isn't human, he's a demon. The protagonist crouches beside him. Tell me everything about the mock sword manor, he demands. I am the only one who can neutralize the poison I just gave you. Meanwhile, in another chamber of the mock sword manor, Mock Inden, the manor master, sits hunched over, racked with coughs. Beside him, a worried physician inspects his ailing body. Despite all my experience, I can't identify this illness, the physician laments silently. He should have chosen a successor long ago. The mock manor is in turmoil. With 4 young masters vying for the position, the master's impending death could spark a bloodbath. Among the contenders, the first wife is especially protective of her son. Who knows what she'll do to secure his place, the physician thinks. The door creaks open and the first wife enters, her gaze icy. How is he, she asks, unfazed by her husband's condition. The physician hesitates, bowing deeply. My apologies, madam, but I cannot determine the cause of his illness. She sighs dramatically. So, shamanism it is, she declares. The physician stammers, trying to protest, but her glare silences him. Escort him out, she orders the guards, dismissing the physician with a wave of her hand. The shaman will handle it, she says, her lips curling into a smile. Back in his quarters, Go-chan spills everything about the manor's power struggles. The protagonist listens intently, piecing together the intricate web of alliances and betrayals. Rising to his feet, he gestures toward the window. Follow me, he commands, his voice dripping with malice. It's time to meet the manor master. The protagonist exited the building, with Go-chan trailing closely behind him. The protagonist asked for confirmation. So what you're saying is that the real Mok Jae-woon and guard Cam intended to use me as a stand-in to provoke Mok Yongo, the firstborn, into making a move? Their plan was for us to kill each other? Go-chan nervously confirmed. He held a parchment, examining it carefully. Go-chan stiffened, fearful of his reaction. The parchment depicted Mok Yongo, a 20-year-old man with a birthmark on his left cheek, infamous for his excessive drinking and womanizing. He frequented taverns almost daily. Despite being the eldest of the 4 siblings, he was the least capable, known for his greed and cruelty. Mok Yun-pyong, the second son, was 18 years old, sharp-eyed, clever, and cunning. His resemblance to his mother was striking. Mok Yun-pyong's ambition to become the lord of the family made him unpredictable. The plot was straightforward: bring the 2 brothers together with a stand-in, himself, and provoke Mok Yun-pyong into killing the imposter. Once the fake was dead, the firstborn would take advantage of the situation to backstab Mok Yun-pyong. The brothers would eliminate each other, leaving Mok Jae-woon as the last contender for the position of heir. The plan would work seamlessly except for one variable. Mok Jae-woon himself was already dead, killed by the protagonist. As they climbed the courtyard stairs, the protagonist tore the parchment into pieces and discarded it. Go-chan, clearly anxious, asked, "Why are you going to see the manor master?" "From what you've told me, the manor master's life seems to be tied to mine," he replied, his voice steady. "That's why I'm paying him a visit." But what if Guard Cam finds out? Go-chan's voice was filled with dread. The protagonist turned back with a faint smile. You'll keep it a secret from him, of course? Thanks in advance. Go-chan cursed his luck under his breath. Near the manor master's chambers, the first wife stood resolutely. As a figure approached, she turned to see an old man of short stature wearing a Taoist robe, a large hat, and holding a staff. It was Shaman Myoshin. Can I see the manor master now? The shaman asked. I've heard of your miraculous abilities, Shaman Myo. I'll trust you this once, the first wife replied, her tone cautious. Thank you. The longer this mysterious illness lasts, the weaker he will become. Please ensure that everyone within 30 paces of the main building leaves. Otherwise it may bring bad luck. I've already done that, she informed him. Only the guard at the entrance remains. You must leave as well, Myoshin instructed. As she departed, she reminded him, don't forget what I've asked for. Of course, Myoshin replied. The manor master's seal and secret manual, correct? If you find those, I'll pay you 300 silver coins immediately, she promised, walking away. The lady's musings revealed her distrust of shamanism, yet desperation had driven her to seek its aid. Her bodyguard and servant followed her closely when her attention was caught by a figure in the training area. Mak Yu-chun, the fourth son, practicing a horse stance. Her disdain was evident as she thought, the child of a lowly geisha. I can understand a dalliance, but considering him for the manor master's position? Unforgivable. As she passed, the protagonist came into view. Spotting Mak Yu-chun, he asked Go-chan, is that Mak Yu-chun? The one renowned for his martial prowess and diligence, with a character similar to the manor master's? Yes, Go-chan confirmed. He's using the horse stance to strengthen his lower body. It's fundamental for martial arts. I see, he mused. Then he asked, Guard Go-chan, if I learn martial arts, will I be able to kill Guard Cam? Go-chan froze, startled by the question. He swallowed nervously and replied, Young master, martial arts start with internal training, breathing techniques to purify nature's energy and gather inner chi. However, accumulating inner chi takes years. Guard Cam has 3 decades more experience than you. Even if you start now, it'll be difficult to surpass him. Is that so? He asked, staring intently ahead, deep in thought. Go-chan thought to himself, this bastard is too clever. Does he know we plan to abandon him? Out loud, he explained, internal training must start young, between the ages of 5 and 9. Impure energy accumulates otherwise, making it nearly impossible to gather inner chi later. The protagonist turned to Go-chan, who was sweating profusely under his unyielding gaze. Your eyes look greedy, he remarked, makes me want to gouge them out. Terrified, Go-chan stammered, Young master, I'll be your loyal servant. He bowed deeply. So killing Guard Cam will be impossible, he concluded. Turning away, he added, Guard Cam doesn't trust me, so bringing him to my side is unlikely. Go-chan whispered urgently, we should leave quickly. The youngest master dislikes you greatly. Why? He asked. 2 years ago, the real young master insulted the youngest's mother, calling her a vulgar bitch. He was beaten severely, Go-chan admitted. The protagonist laughed. The youngest has a good temperament, he said, amused. At least he left all 4 limbs intact. In the manor master's chamber, Shaman Myoshin worked intently, red threads with coins hanging above the unconscious master. Purple veins coursed over the master's skin, emanating murderous energy. Myoshin chanted as he applied a glowing talisman, battling the overwhelming energy. Suddenly the door opened, snapping a thread. The shaman was flung backward as the protagonist entered. What's all this? Go-chan exclaimed, shocked by the scene. Ignoring the shaman, he approached the bed. With a calm smile, he greeted the manor master. Hello, father. I give you my greetings. The shaman bellowed at them to get out immediately, regardless of whether the protagonist was the manor master's son. His agitation was evident as he shouted, Have you not been informed of what Lady Suk instructed? Guard Go-chan, stepping forward, blocked the shaman and questioned his authority to command the young master. Meanwhile, the protagonist observed the manor master groaning in pain at his bedside. The shaman explained that because of their interference, the mysterious illness had reversed, worsening the state of the murderous energy. Murderous energy? Are you an alchemist? Go-chan asked, visibly confused. Ignoring the query, the shaman grew more frantic, repeatedly urging them to leave. Before he could elaborate, a horrific sound escaped from the manor master's mouth, leaving the shaman stunned. The manor master's screams grew louder as saliva dripped from his mouth. His eyes turned blood red, his face pale, and purple veins bulged across his skin. Suddenly, his body began floating, his head tilting unnaturally with his mouth agape. Purple energy surged from his chest as the mysterious illness took full control of his body. The shaman, panicking, called for assistance to hold him down, fearing the strings keeping the illness in check would break. The manor master floated higher, and the talisman controlling the energy tore, leaving the shaman's efforts futile. The protagonist and Go-chan rushed to restrain him as the shaman frantically applied another talisman to his forehead, chanting rapidly. Furious, the Manor Master glared at them, breaking Go-chan's hand with ease. Go-chan screamed in agony as tears welled up in his eyes. The shaman exclaimed that the Manor Master had grown even stronger under the influence of the illness and warned them to back away to avoid being infected themselves. Purple, tentacled bugs emerged from the Manor Master's arm, and Go-chan, trapped by the Manor Master's grip, screamed in terror. The protagonist swiftly drew his sword and severed the Manor Master's hand, freeing Go-chan. Blood splattered across the room, shocking both Go-chan and the shaman. Despite the severed hand, the bug continued to move along the arm. Unperturbed, the protagonist advanced and severed the other arm as well, ignoring Go-chan's frantic protests. The shaman watched in disbelief, internally calling the protagonist a crazy bastard. As the bloodied arm hit the ground, the shaman quickly affixed a talisman to it. I failed my job and now the Manor Master has lost his arm. I need to leave before the blame falls on me, he thought. Before he could act on his plan, a blade was suddenly pointed at his neck, startling him. What is the meaning of this? The shaman demanded as the protagonist questioned him about the infected arm. The shaman tried to evade responsibility, but the protagonist's relentless questioning cornered him. He pressed the shaman further, accusing him of complicity in the Manor Master's condition. The shaman, realizing he had no choice, confessed that the First Lady had hired him to locate the secret manual and Manor Master's seal, deeming the Manor Master's life unimportant. Go-chan was shocked by the revelation, but the protagonist's expression remained calm. The secret manual? The Manor Master's seal? He repeated. Go-chan pieced together the situation, realizing that if they hadn't intervened, the first son would have become the Manor Master. Young Master, we must save the Manor Master, Go-chan urged. If the first son becomes the Manor Master, the First Lady will undoubtedly try to have you killed. The protagonist considered this for a moment before instructing the shaman to proceed. Find the location of the secret manual and the seal, he commanded, lifting the blade from the shaman's neck. Despite his reluctance, the shaman began the preparations. He wrapped a red thread around a wooden doll and attached a talisman to it. Explaining his plan, he said, "This doll will act as a vessel. We will link it to the Manor Master to trick the evil spirit into believing this is the Manor Master's body." The shaman commenced the ritual, chanting rigorously as the red thread glowed. The evil spirit moved along the thread toward the wooden doll while the Manor Master screamed in agohi. The shaman's chanting grew louder as the spirit gripped the doll, but the murderous energy was too strong. The shaman hesitated, realizing that forcing the ritual further could free the spirit entirely. Suddenly the shaman had an idea. Sending Go-chan outside, he resumed chanting and making hand signs. An inhuman voice emanated from the Manor Master, asking, "Who calls upon me? Answer my questions," the shaman demanded. "Where are the Manor Master's secret manual and seal?" The voice struggled but eventually revealed the location, the medicinal hall underground, past the front stone door. The shaman and protagonist listened intently as the wooden doll shattered beside them, releasing the evil spirit, which began moving along the thread toward the Manor Master. The shaman screamed for the protagonist to cut the thread before the spirit could take over the Manor Master's body. The protagonist acted swiftly, slashing the thread. However, the evil spirit fell to the ground and began crawling up the protagonist's leg, startling him. As the spirit approached the protagonist's face, the shaman smiled, revealing his hidden intentions. The protagonist's expression shifted as he realized he had walked into the shaman's trap. As the evil spirit entered the protagonist's body, the shaman quickly pressed a talisman onto his forehead, muttering to himself about the spirit's immense killing intent. He recognized it as a formidable presence and believed it was only a matter of time before the spirit would break free. The shaman considered himself fortunate that the spirit transfer was successful, as it allowed him to achieve his mission and eliminate a significant obstacle. Smiling to himself, he decided he would shift all the blame onto the protagonist. The protagonist sat motionless on the floor, his eyes vacant, with the talisman hanging on his forehead. Within his mind, the evil spirit's voice echoed, furious. It sneered at the protagonist, accusing him of deceit. "You dare trick me with this puppet? I won't forgive you," it declared, its red eyes gleaming with malice. Observing the protagonist's youthful body, the spirit laughed menacingly. "This is much better than that old man's form. I'll take over your body, and you will be trapped in your own mind, forever in slumber," it proclaimed. The protagonist's memories began to resurface. He found himself standing by a serene watering hole nestled in the mountains, a place he frequently visited in his youth. Birds chirped on nearby branches, and the tranquility of the scene brought back a flood of recollections. "I know this place well," he thought. "Even if I tried, I could never forget it. Yet today it feels strange, as if I've forgotten something important." Suddenly, smoke billowed from the direction of his home. Alarmed, the protagonist dropped his water bucket and sprinted toward the fire, shouting desperately for his grandfather. As he approached the flames, his worst fears materialized. His grandfather lay on the ground, his body bloodied and gruesomely torn in half. Overcome with grief, the protagonist cradled his lifeless form, begging him to wake up. "No. Grandfather. You can't leave me," he cried. A painful realization dawned upon him as he gripped the body tightly. For the first time, he fully understood his grandfather's profound importance in his life. Tears streamed down his face as he mourned the loss of the one person who had always stood by him. From the shadows, the evil spirit observed with a sinister smirk. "So this is what you desire," it mused. Extending its hand, it released a dark energy that coiled toward the protagonist. A voice suddenly broke through the chaos. "Hey, what are you doing over there?" the protagonist heard, his heart skipping a beat. He turned in shock, immediately recognizing the voice. It was his grandfather standing before him, alive and well. "Grandfather? What's going on?" he stammered, his confusion evident. Without thinking, he rushed forward and embraced him. The old man chuckled, taken aback by the sudden display of affection. "Careful, you're going to knock me over. What's gotten into you all of a sudden?" The protagonist trembled as he clung to him. "I won't lose him again," he resolved silently. "He's the only reason I'm still alive." From a distance, the evil spirit laughed, pleased with its manipulation. "Yes, that's it," it said. "Cherished memories of a lost past, love and happiness, all of it makes the trap so much sweeter." Still holding his grandfather, the protagonist asked a question that had long been on his mind. "Grandfather, why did you name me after the character For Righteous?" Realizing the deception, the protagonist turned to the evil spirit, his expression darkening. "You," he growled, lunging at the spirit and grabbing its face. The spirit flinched in shock. "Impossible. How can he see me?" it sputtered. "You made me relive something I buried deep," the protagonist said coldly. "Playing with my grandfather's image? That's unforgivable." He tightened his grip as the spirit writhed in pain. The protagonist's smile twisted into something sinister. "You misunderstood my desires. If you really wanted to trap me, you should have let me rip apart the one who killed my grandfather," he said, his voice dripping with malice. The spirit recoiled as it sensed an overwhelming killing intent surging from the protagonist. A primal, terrifying force that even spirits feared. The dark energy radiated from him as he reached for the spirit again, declaring his dominance. "You asked why I named you Righteous," the fading image of his grandfather's voice echoed. "I hoped you would always follow a righteous path even when it's hard. Stay true to your name." The evil spirit screamed in terror, realizing it was being consumed by the very host it sought to control. It tried to retreat deeper into the protagonist's consciousness but found itself trapped in a vast, sunlit field with a single door standing in the middle. The door was sealed with a talisman, emanating a dark aura. The spirit hesitated, wondering if the door concealed the protagonist's memories. Before it could act, shadows erupted from the ground, binding it in place. "No. Stop this. I will not be devoured," it shrieked as it was pulled into the abyss. The protagonist awoke with a jolt, his eyes glowing with a menacing energy. Shadows curled around his fingers as a figure materialized behind him. Turning, he saw the demon monk, who knelt and greeted him with reverence. "Master," the demon monk said, his voice filled with dark loyalty. The shaman stepped back in fear, his eyes wide with terror. This was no ordinary vengeful spirit, it was a high-class evil spirit. The protagonist smiled, his expression cold. "Demonic monk," he commanded, "go kill that shaman." The evil spirit lunged forward without hesitation. The shaman bellowed, "Confront," as he deployed a barrier to block the attack. The golden energy repelled the spirit, forcing it back. The shaman's mind raced. Did he just command a vengeful spirit? That should be impossible. A vengeful spirit is pure evil, how can it possibly follow someone's orders? The barrier cracked under the spirit's relentless assault, shoving the shaman backward. Regaining his balance, the shaman stared at the evil spirit, which laughed at him mockingly. The spirit surged forward, hands outstretched. "No," the shaman cried, turning to flee. Desperately, he grabbed a sword to defend himself, but he was no match for the monstrous entity. The evil spirit opened its mouth, and several small hands crawled out, reaching for the shaman. His scream echoed through the room. "Save me," he pleaded, his terrified eyes locking onto the protagonist. "I will do anything." The protagonist regarded him with a straight face. "I don't need it." "Is it because I tricked you?" the shaman asked desperately. "No, that's not why," the protagonist said calmly. Kneeling beside him, he continued, "Didn't you learn about the seal and the secret manual?" The shaman cursed internally. He was planning to kill me from the start. The protagonist called for Go-chan, who had been waiting outside. As soon as the guard entered, his eyes widened in horror. The shaman's body was completely mangled. The sight was inhuman. "Is he dead?" Go-chan asked hesitantly. "Ask questions later. Carry the corpse," the protagonist ordered. "We'll blame everything on the shaman. Say he was possessed and even cut off the manor master's arm. We, the saviors, stopped him from causing any further harm." Picking up a sword nearby, he swung it violently, slashing furniture and walls. He intended to make it look like the shaman had gone berserk. Will they believe it so easily? Go-chan wondered, looking around the wreckage. Asterisk the manor mistress isn't easily deceived. She will question everything asterisk. Young master, he spoke cautiously, your half-hearted attempt at concealment will only draw more suspicion. Was it that obvious? The protagonist asked with a smirk. Even if they believe the story, the first mistress won't accept it without question. The protagonist considered this. I should make it more convincing. Let's do this. He held the sword firmly. Let's blame him for trying to kill me too. Before Go-chan could react, the protagonist stabbed his own thigh, a smile still on his face. What are you doing? The guard exclaimed in shock. The protagonist let the bloody sword clatter to the floor. Is it more believable now? He asked, his hands soaked in blood. Go-chan, amazed by his determination, rushed forward. I'll stop the bleeding. No, the protagonist refused. It will be easier to convince them if I look pale. Suddenly a man entered the room. Inner manor lord, Go-chan cried out in alarm. The man's face was filled with dread and confusion as he took in the chaotic scene. The manor master lay unconscious on the bed, missing an arm, while the shaman's lifeless body knelt beside him. You bastards! What have you done? The man roared. Go-chan panicked. It's a misunderstanding. The protagonist, feigning panic, gasped, Inner manor master. Before anything you should check on the manor master. Stretching out his bloodied hand, he limped forward before suddenly collapsing to the ground. The inner manor master hesitated, looking between the injured young man and the carnage around him. What is going on here? He demanded, his voice uncertain. The protagonist, lying on the floor, smiled to himself. Later at the medical hall, the protagonist lay on a bed, his injuries treated. His thoughts returned to the seal and the secret manual that the possessed manor master had spoken of. It should be right below where I am now, a smirk played on his lips. Asterisk ending up here worked out perfectly. I'll check it out at night when fewer people are around asterisk. Young master, I'm here, Go-chan announced, entering with his arm in a sling. You're late, the protagonist remarked. These are the books the shaman brought, Go-chan said, handing him 2 manuals. Only 2, the protagonist asked. I barely managed to get these before they burned everything else, Go-chan explained. Burned? The protagonist repeated, his brows furrowing. They're destroying all evidence. The protagonist flipped through the books, nodding. You did well. Go-chan hesitated. Why are you reading those books? He asked. The protagonist pointed toward the window. What do you see outside? Go-chan approached the window. Nothing. Outside, looming just beyond sight, the evil spirit hovered in the air. That's why I need to figure it out, the protagonist murmured. A sudden shout from outside the room interrupted them. You can't. The young master is still recovering. A silhouette approached. Move, the voice commanded. The door opened, revealing the first lady, Lady Suk. She entered with an air of contempt, her gaze filled with disgust. Let's have a chat, she said coolly. Go-chan bowed. Madam? The protagonist studied her. Asterisk, so this is the first wife from the martial Suk clan. Cam said she's a first-rate martial artist and exceptionally cunning. Asterisk, he inclined his head slightly. Please understand I cannot rise due to my injuries. I'm not here for pleasantries, she snapped. Without warning, she struck his injured leg. The protagonist let out a sharp cry of pain. Her bodyguard stepped forward, pressing a sword to Go-chan's throat. Don't move. Lady Suk smirked. So you really are injured? It must have been difficult, having to hurt yourself just to make your lies more convincing. She leaned in, her amusement evident. You presented a well-crafted story to the inner hall master, but you overlooked something. A skilled shaman would never be possessed during a ritual. For him to have lost control? She laughed mockingly. Did you really think I'd fall for such a half-baked lie? She struck the protagonist across the face, sending him staggering against the wall. Young master, Go-chan cried out. Lady Suk loomed over him. I won't ask again. What did you see and hear? The protagonist lay limp for a moment, then his lips curled into a chilling smile. His laughter grew louder, turning into an eerie, crazed cackle. Lady Suk frowned. Have you lost your mind? Blood dripped from his mouth. With a wicked grin, he uttered 2 words, demonic monk. The evil spirit materialized behind him, its ominous presence filling the room. The protagonist pointed at Lady Suk. The demonic monk rushed toward her. Lady Suk gasped as the spirit passed through her. What was that? She muttered, bewildered. Behind her, a servant let out a terrified scream. Remembering this is the same thing that killed Shaman Myoshin, her expression darkened. The seal and the secret manual, those are what you need, the protagonist said, smiling behind her. A piercing scream echoed through the room as the servant was lifted into the air. Sowa, the guard, cried out in alarm, but it was futile. Then you should have approached me for a negotiation instead of trying to threaten me, the protagonist continued. You? Lady Suk stammered, momentarily at a loss for words. Whether you believe me or not is your choice, but let me make one thing clear. I have no desire to be the manor master. However, he leaned in slightly, your son isn't the only one who covets that position. Lady Suk's eyes widened. Since you've decided to treat me this way, I have no choice but to pay my second brother a visit, he said with a chilling smile. You, she spat, her voice laced with frustration. Ah, the youngest is quite talented in martial arts, isn't he? The protagonist's voice was casual, yet every word struck a nerve. Since he and I were never on good terms, wouldn't it be a fitting gesture to hand over the secret manual to him as a way to mend our relationship? He took a step forward. Do you understand now? His smile deepened. You're not the one with the upper hand in this situation. Turning away, he gestured subtly. The weather is cold. Take care on your way back. Lady Sook clenched her fists but had no choice but to retreat. At her residence, Lady Sook's fury exploded. She screamed, thrashing furniture across the room. How dare he? She kicked a chair, splintering it beneath her feet. How dare he? How dare he? Her bodyguard stepped forward cautiously. My lady, please calm yourself. Does it look like I can calm down? She snapped, her voice venomous. Some fool has stolen the fruit of my labor. She clenched her fist, seething. Damn it. I let my guard down. How did he change so much all of a sudden? Her thoughts churned, suspicion creeping in. Could he have been hiding his true self this entire time? Or, did he change to protect himself? She exhaled sharply, eyes narrowing. I shouldn't have underestimated him. The guard hesitated. Shall I kill him? Lady Sook shook her head. Not yet. We don't know the location of the secret manual. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath before issuing her next order. Send word to the Phoenix Pavilion. Inform them that the shaman Myo Shin is dead. The Phoenix Pavilion. The very organization to which Myo Shin belonged. A slow, calculating smile crept across her lips. Later that night, medical hall. The protagonist sat beneath the dim glow of a lantern, flipping through one of the shaman's books. When a dead person becomes an evil spirit, it is due to unresolved resentment. There are various levels of evil spirits, red, orange, and yellow. A yellow-class spirit is capable of taking a human life. A familiar, chilling presence manifested beside him. Demonic monk, he acknowledged without looking up. Did you find it? He glanced at the spirit, thoughtful. So, the demonic monk is a yellow-class spirit. Closing the book, he stood and made his way to a nearby herb cabinet. Sliding open one of the drawers, he pressed against the back panel, revealing a hidden passageway beneath. The evil spirit didn't work on Lady Sook. That's why I had to target the servant instead. His fingers curled slightly. Lady Sook is a first-rate martial artist. That means it won't work on Guard Cam either. He's first-rate as well. A smirk played at his lips. Then I'll simply need a stronger spirit. His gaze flickered back to the book. Fourth class, green spirits. Spirits capable of controlling their environment and inducing hallucinations. Extremely dangerous. Must be exorcised immediately. The protagonist's smirk widened. All right, he murmured, snapping the book shut. Let's do this. Grabbing a lantern, he stepped toward the dark stairway leading below. The protagonist thought deeply, following the path carefully. To go to such lengths to hide a secret manual must mean it was important. I won't lose anything by having them, he thought to himself, descending the steps. He reached a door at the bottom and entered. Braziers lit the way to several doors. He remembered it was the fourth door and stepped through it. The area stretched far into the darkness. Do I need to go further? Is this really necessary? The protagonist wondered. Just then, his foot landed on a plate and a boulder fell from above. The protagonist barely dodged it. Are there traps here? He thought. Then something flashed on the wall and arrows flew toward him. He dodged the first 3 and parried the next 6. One arrow remained, which he blocked with his lamp. Another trap sprang toward him, but he dodged it as well. He couldn't help but wonder, is the secret manual really that valuable, or is there something else down here? Several more traps came for him, but he dodged them easily without a scratch. I must have finally reached my destination, he thought. The place was made of wood and seemed to have been lived in. The protagonist approached the box at the center and opened it, finding 2 manuals, Adamant Resolve and the Wood Heart Sword Transformation Technique. He recalled that Guard Go-chan had told him the secret manual was divided into 2 parts. He picked up the manuals and stuffed them into his clothes. As he looked around for anything else, he spotted an unusual box. It looked unnecessarily heavy and non-functional, with traces of having been dragged. Maybe it was placed here to hide something beneath it, he thought. The protagonist dragged the box away, revealing a small wooden panel sealed with talismans. He opened it to find another box inside, also sealed with talismans. He could sense ominous energy emanating from it. He tore the seal, and as soon as he opened the box, the lamp went out. Inside was a book with a leather cover, not just any book but one with a sickening smell and texture. It was made from human skin. The protagonist smiled wickedly. He could feel death emanating from the book, and although he sweated profusely, he couldn't help but smile. I want to open this book right now, he thought to himself. Suddenly, the demonic monk appeared beside him without being summoned. He looked around, searching for something, then stared at the book, startled, before kneeling respectfully. The protagonist questioned him, but the demonic monk trembled in fear. The protagonist became more determined to open the book. But if the demonic monk is here, someone must be nearby, a possible intruder, he thought, his expression turning blank. Just outside the medical hall, the assassin appeared. Guard Go-chan was standing outside. Seizing the opportunity, the assassin climbed onto the roof. He peeked inside the chamber and found the protagonist sleeping soundly. He's just sleeping? Then why did he make Guard Go-chan stand outside? The assassin thought. He stepped inside and noticed something on the table. It caught his attention. It was the secret manual. He flipped through the pages to confirm it. What's it doing here? He wondered. This is all the young master needs to gain the upper hand in the succession. It'll be our victory. Distracted by the manual, he didn't notice the protagonist standing behind him. The protagonist swiftly grabbed his head and slammed it into the table. What business do you have with me? He asked. Then he bashed the assassin again and again, growing increasingly curious. Blood dripped all over his face. Hearing the commotion, Guard Go-chan rushed in. Cho Il-sang, he shouted, surprised to see him there. The protagonist asked if the guard knew the masked man, and Guard Go-chan replied, his name is Cho Il-sang and he's one of the second son's guards. The second son's guard? Why would he be here? The protagonist questioned. I'm not sure, but considering he's wearing a mask, he can't have had any good intentions, Guard Go-chan replied, thinking. Let's make him talk, the protagonist said, picking him up over his shoulder. You can't torture him. It'd be better to let him go, the guard urged. The second son is very protective of his people. If you torture him, he will be furious. The protagonist twisted Cho Il-sang's arm. I'll think about it, he said, walking away. Guard Go-chan urged him to reconsider. It'll be really bad, he screamed. Young master, he called out from behind, but the protagonist ignored him. Later, the protagonist tied the masked man upside down. Untie me, the intruder said calmly and confidently. Why? The protagonist asked, confused. Since you've seen my face, you must already know I'm here on orders from Mak Yunpyeong. Do you think you can survive after harming me? Don't make things difficult. Just give me the secret manual, and the young master will spare your life, Cho Il-sang said, smiling at the protagonist. Realized he was trying to scare him into revealing their plan. As if that would work on me, he thought, smiling wickedly. Kick, that's fun, he muttered. It must be true then, that my older brother really values his subordinates. You think you have the upper hand even in this situation. Alright, I'll untie you. Good. Wise choice, Cho Il-sang said happily as his hands were freed. Huh. Cho Il-sang looked down at his freed hands, only to see his finger had been cut off. Pop quiz, the protagonist said with a wicked grin. Whose finger could this be? The man's mind raced. My finger's been cut off and I can't feel anything. Plus I can't move. I used paralysis poison on you, the protagonist explained. You won't feel anything below your neck for a few hours. I'm going to ask you some questions now. If you don't answer, I'll cut one finger per second. He held up the bloodied knife. First question, why did my brother send you? The man hesitated. Wait. Before he could finish, another of his fingers was cut off. You're not answering? I'll keep going then, the protagonist said happily, cutting another finger off. You son of a bitch, stop. Cho Il-sang shouted, panicking. 3 fingers. 4. Stop. Please stop, he pleaded, his voice breaking. The thumb is next, the protagonist said calmly. Realizing there was no way to stop the pain, Cho Il-sang began speaking. Young master asked me to check if you've really lost your martial arts, he said. A moment of silence followed before the protagonist processed the information. Guard Cam must have switched sides to the second young master. He's been selling information to gain his trust, the protagonist realized. Did Guard Cam say that? He asked. That's right, Cho Il-sang confirmed. He was pretty clever with that one, the protagonist said. He told a half-truth without revealing his failure. The man looked at him as the protagonist stood. But now I don't have any more questions. Now what? The protagonist asked, facing Cho Il-sang. The man realized he was in danger. I'm going to die, he thought, fear surging through him. I'll swear my loyalty to you, he shouted desperately. I didn't know you were this smart. You're the perfect candidate for Manor Master. I'll risk my life for you, take me in. Please, please. Alright, the protagonist said. There's something you need to do for me anyway. Can I ask you right now? I'm saved, Cho Il-sang thought, relief flooding through him. Of course. Give me the order. Before he could ask what the protagonist wanted, the protagonist stabbed a knife into his neck. Cho Il-sang screamed in a gohee as the protagonist smiled. You said you'd risk your life for me, the protagonist said coldly. Then let me borrow some blood. As blood poured from the man's neck, the protagonist placed the unusual book he had found under him, letting the blood drip onto it. As the blood soaked the book, the seal came undone and the rosary cracked. Blood surged from the box, splattering everywhere. In an instant, blood began covering the entire space. A shape formed in the center of the pool of blood, and a heartbeat echoed as a woman emerged from it, her long gown trailing behind her. The protagonist was pushed back, trying to block it with his arms. What's going on? He wondered. In the domain of blood, the woman moved toward him, her sharp red eyes locked onto him as red butterflies danced around her. The protagonist initially thought it might be a green spirit, something very dangerous. But this was on another level. The 5th level of spirit described in the shaman's book. Blue spirit, he realized. He stared at her in awe before a heavy pressure forced him to his knees. Foolish sentient being, the woman said coldly. Let go of your soul and offer up your body to me. Blue spirits, the protagonist recalled. A hateful spirit that has existed for centuries. It takes at least 10 shamans to successfully subdue it. Extremely dangerous. The woman smoked a pipe and gazed at him. What? You're still struggling? You sure are slow, she taunted. The protagonist, though struggling, smiled. Interesting, he muttered. What? The evil spirit asked, confused. All ghosts, regardless of level, want someone's body, the protagonist said, still struggling to stand. It's funny that you're all so desperate for it. I guess ghosts can't do anything without a body. The evil spirit smiled. If you want my body, the protagonist continued, then try to take it from me. The woman raised her arm and a blood spike shot toward him, hitting his side. Foolish mortal, she mocked as the protagonist fell. She swung her arm again and blood spikes rained down on him. The protagonist coughed in pain. Do you get it now? The evil spirit asked, smiling elegantly as she raised her hand. There's nothing you can do. So be a good boy and give me your body, she said. As the protagonist seemed to be on the verge of collapse, he slid his leg to balance himself, shocking the spirit with his willpower. Half of his face was gone and his side was badly injured. The evil spirit silently observed him. You're no ordinary human, she finally remarked. Well, she said, it doesn't matter. She raised her arm and blood began coiling around his leg. Before the protagonist could respond, she threw him into the pillar. She floated toward him. Let's make a deal, she said. Give me your body and I'll grant you a wish. Why are you offering something like that? The protagonist asked. I'm being kind, she replied. It's not good for me if your body is too damaged. And if I reject your offer? The protagonist pressed. Then I'll kill you and find another human, she threatened, glaring at him. The protagonist was silent for a moment. I do have a wish, he said. The evil spirit smiled, feeling her victory. With that kind of determination you must have lived a hard life. Have you been betrayed? Has your family been murdered? Tell me and I'll rip them to pieces. I'll make sure only their ashes remain. So tell me, what is your wish? She asked, smiling. My wish is for you to shut up and become my familiar spirit, the protagonist said, his voice filled with sarcasm. The evil spirit clicked her tongue in frustration. All right, you've brought this upon yourself, she said, gathering her power. You foolish mortal, she sneered, raising her arm. Several blood spikes shot toward him. The protagonist gasped as blood overwhelmed him, drowning him in a sea of blood. Your flesh will be slashed, your bones carved, and your limbs torn off. Can you endure that? The evil spirit's voice echoed. As the protagonist drowned deeper, he thought, this taste, all my senses are telling me it's blood, but it's different. I've tasted so much blood during my rampage. So, what did the blood I tasted feel like? The vibration of life, heat, and warmth. That was life. But what he was feeling now was death. As he reached that conclusion, everything began to crack. This is an illusion, he thought. The evil spirit gasped as more and more cracks appeared, and the illusion shattered, knocking her back. Impossible, she gasped, staring at the protagonist as he stood tall. A blood butterfly formed in the air, and the evil spirit released it toward him. As it reached him, it splashed across his face but caused no harm. Transcendence, the evil spirit thought, realizing the truth. A way to escape any hallucination by rejecting all 5 senses. It's extremely difficult even for a first-rate shaman, but this child, he's not even a shaman. Could it be that he was born with the qualities of a great shaman? The protagonist smiled, then laughed loudly. You dare laugh? The evil spirit demanded. You may have broken the illusion, but do you think you have the upper hand? The protagonist shook his head. No, I just had a fun idea. What? The evil spirit asked, confused. You, she shouted,